I'm not sure if you're aware, we still can't hear.
I think they are not aware, but I don't know how to let them know again.
It's the computer with MD.
Yeah, and it's also, I think the problem it relies in that Coloquio, which is for this meeting, is also muted. And also the translator are muted. Soporte idiomas means support for. José Juan, buenos días. Estamos aquí, Elena y yo, pero vosotros estáis apagados vuestros micrófonos. No, nosotros no os oímos a vosotros, porque aparece en la pantalla que estáis todos muted. A lo mejor podemos proceder mediante lenguaje gestual. Ahora no. Ahora sí. Aleluya.
Yeah. Give me a second. No, es que ese no funciona. Es que no es de ahí no van a salir. Ellos tienen que cambiar Es que el doctor creo que no les...
Deben de colocarse en español, si desean hacer la interpretación, o en inglés.
A ver, otra vez, dígale.
Íñigo, the floor is yours.
Está cerrado el micrófono. Pero no.
Sí, hola, buenas tardes.
No, la canción.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Íñigo.
José Juan, how are you, José Juan?
Hi.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you very much to Professor José Juan González for this kind invitation to participate in the launch of this new book of the Academic Advisory Group. It was also very interesting to watch at Damilola video, even though neither Elena nor myself couldn't hear anything about that video, but we know Damilola for long now, and we are sure that the ideas he presented to the audience were of great interest. I do have a presentation, a slide presentation, José Juan. Would you like to upload it, or should I, from my screen, or what?
¿Puedes poner la presentación?
Sí, ya.
Right now, Íñigo.
Good, thank you. Thank you. Yes. There you have in this first
Gracias.
slide the name of this new book of the Academic Advisory Group.
Con esta presentación voy a hablar sobre este nuevo libro. Sé que el profesor ya les estaba hablando de sobre los temas. Cuando hablamos de leyes energéticas, debemos hablar sobre la regulación de la misma. Desde una perspectiva particular, las regulaciones no son más que los aspectos que contempla la ley. Es así que podemos regular el sistema de energía para llegar a las economías de net zero. Hay un desconocimiento popular sobre lo que tratamos de lograr desde 2015.
The world in which we live will achieve the zero emissions objective.
Hemos tratado de llegar a estos objetivos del net zero.
Economy for the year 2050.
Cuando hablamos de esto en 2015, 2050, estamos hablando sobre
actually emitted to the atmosphere.
Sobre equilibrar las emisiones de CO2 con las que ya se encuentran en la atmósfera. Buscamos un equilibrio. Es algo difícil de conseguir, pero es lo que estamos tratando de hacer de lo que hablamos cuando hablamos de economía net zero. Claro, esto que presentamos es una colección de artículos legales que hablan sobre los aspectos de la ley net zero. Sin embargo, también se toman en cuenta otras ciencias como la sociología, como las políticas y las regulaciones energéticas, así como la economía que lo rodea. Desde cierta perspectiva, la regulación es el punto donde se juntan varias ciencias con el mismo objetivo, de nuevo, la energía. Esta es la 12ª iteración de nuestra colección. Es algo que hemos reunido desde el año 2002. Para esto vamos a la siguiente diapositiva, por favor.
Well, this book has been devoted with affection.
Este libro ha sido dedicado con mucho cariño a nuestro queridísimo colega y amigo Don Silman. Él falleció mientras Busco estaba siendo presentado. El profesor Silman fue uno de los fundadores de la AAGG en 1993 y él siempre fue muy constante en todas las juntas de nuestro grupo. Él siempre atendió a todas nuestras juntas con su esposa. Aquí tenemos una fotografía de ambos en el día que estaban inaugurando un museo en, en mayo, en Presque Island, que fue fundado con el dinero que ellos donaron para crearlo. Y es arte aborigen y contemporáneo. De eso es el museo. Entonces, ellos son seres muy... Linda y Don son muy filantrópicos. Don tenía muchísima energía. Él hizo posible el trabajo de este grupo. Y yo me acuerdo cuando yo lo conocí un par de veces en la Universidad de Almería, en donde yo trabajo. Y, y sí, él era parte de las carreras que organizábamos, porque ¿a dónde iba? A él siempre le gustaba mucho correr, llevaba sus tenis a todos lados y se echaba a correr diario, diario. Entonces, muchísimas gracias. Gracias, Don. Gracias por todo el trabajo que hiciste por este grupo. Y bueno, te llevamos en el corazón y llevamos en nuestro trabajo todas las contribuciones que has hecho a la ciencia y el trabajo que nosotros realizamos.
Can you please move to the next
Por favor,
slide?
podemos pasar a la siguiente. José Juan, ¿podemos pasar a la siguiente diapositiva, por favor?
Okay. Here you have the structure of,
Aquí tenemos la estructura del libro, porque la imprenta de la Universidad de Oxford ha estado publicando estos libros colectivos y ha pedido que este tipo de publicaciones sean una colección de capítulos que vayan concatenados. Ellos ya no van a apoyar libros colectivos en los cuales tengamos un capítulo sobre un problema que no tenga nada que ver con los demás capítulos, en donde la publicación sea sumamente vaga. Ellos están buscando libros que tengan una línea clara y una conexión muy clara entre los diferentes capítulos. También nuestro compañero Damiola Olabuyi y José Juan, quienes son los editores, ellos conocen muy bien el nivel de dificultad que tiene poder hacer uno de estos capítulos, aunque sea como un borrador, y poder llevarlo a cabo. Este libro va alrededor de tres ejes del net cero y del derecho de los recursos naturales. Tenemos la soberanía, seguridad y solidaridad entre los países. Entonces sería un error asumir que muchos de los problemas a los que nos enfrentamos actualmente de manera diaria van a desaparecer en una transición o que van a desaparecer después de la transición. Por el contrario, todos estamos conscientes de los nuevos problemas que estamos enfrentando y de los problemas medioambientales a los que nos enfrentaremos. Cada sistema energético cuenta con tres pilares. Uno es la seguridad, uno es la sustentabilidad ambiental, y otro es la eficiencia económica. Entonces, estos tres pilares interactúan entre ellos. Algunas veces tienes que apoyar ciertos de estos rubros para poder ser más efectivo en costos. Algunas veces tienes que aplicar un poco más de estrés a la seguridad, dejando de lado un poco la sustentabilidad o tal vez la eficiencia económica. Entonces, esto siempre dependerá de la corriente política, del pensamiento político que se aplique. La transición para la parte de la transición energética nos presenta muchísimos problemas en términos de seguridad, en términos de soberanía y de solidaridad. Y este libro sobre las iniciativas de la Net Zero, que tiene que ver con el autoconsumo, autoproducción, con comunidades energéticas, con el uso de nuevas fuentes de energía renovables, nos presenta muchísimos problemas porque tenemos muchos problemas en la parte de la seguridad del aspecto energético, porque muchas veces, bueno, algunas veces no te das cuenta de lo que está sucediendo si solo no nos estamos dando cuenta de que es todo lo que puede suceder si solo nos enfocamos en el uso de las energías renovables. Entonces, estos problemas que presentan, estos nuevos paradigmas que se están presentando, también tienen que darle la forma al nuevo sistema legal que va a abogar y abocarse a todos estos nuevos tipos de energía. Esta es mi cuarta diapositiva antes de que le ceda la palabra a mi compañera Elena. ¿Cuál es el acercamiento metodológico que tuvimos en este libro? Muy bien, tuvimos diferentes capítulos temáticos y estuvimos identificando puntos claves, impactos asociados con la transición energética, pero también tenemos casos de estudio en los cuales hemos experimentado cómo este trabajo en términos reales en el campo, en África, en la Unión Europea, en Latinoamérica. Tenemos muchos casos de estudios, algunos de ellos han sido escritos por el profesor José Juan González, y el tercer método que utilizamos para estos aspectos es cómo utilizamos la parte de la técnica legal con la que estamos utilizando para lidiar con los nuevos problemas que están lidiados con la transición energética. Las instituciones legales tienen que ser probadas con la realidad para permitir que realmente se lleve a cabo la transición. Muchísimas gracias por la invitación al lanzamiento, a la presentación de este libro en este foro tan prestigioso de la UAM. Les mando mis saludos más cálidos al doctor José Juan González y al resto de la audiencia, y le cedo la palabra a Elena.
Good morning to everyone in Mexico.
Hola, buenos días a todos en México. Hola, ya es la tarde aquí en Doha, en Qatar. Hola a todos. Buenos días a todos, buenas tardes a todas las zonas y usos horarios en los que nos encontramos conectados. Quiero darle nuestras gracias a los organizadores de esta excelente sesión. Bueno, creo que vamos a comenzar con la diapositiva número 5, por favor. No sé si puedan ver las diapositivas. Sí, me parece que sí. Sí, vamos a la siguiente diapositiva, por favor. Increíble, muy bien, muchas gracias. Muchísimas gracias. Muy bien, ahora les voy a contar un poco sobre esta sección. Estamos hablando de la sección sobre la soberanía. La soberanía sobre los recursos naturales es un principio fundamental de la ley internacional. Hay definiciones específicas que son muy ricas y muy amplias, que toman en cuenta minerales y otros recursos naturales. Y según vayamos navegando por el cambio global a este futuro para lograr la net zero, la verdadera batalla para los países que son ricos en recursos, como los países latinoamericanos o africanos, es alcanzar un equilibrio entre la soberanía de un lado y, por otro lado, cumplir con las obligaciones ESG y de cambio climático. Todo esto requiere un acercamiento muy novedoso que, por una parte, nos permita tener autonomía nacional y que, por el otro lado, nos permita tener una integración global para un desarrollo sustentable. El día de hoy vamos a estar hablando de las políticas ESG en el contexto de las inversiones en los recursos naturales, y vamos a explorar cómo aquí podemos empoderar a los países a ejercer su soberanía de forma responsable, mientras que también están impulsando la resiliencia y la inclusión económica en esta transición de las energías limpias. El día de hoy tenemos la parte de ESG, que son nuestros factores medioambientales y de seguridad y de gobernanza. Y aquí vamos a navegar las complejidades del derecho medioambiental. Y aquí vamos a tratar de mantenernos en línea con el desarrollo sustentable, con prácticas éticas. Y cuando pensamos en las políticas ESG, no es, no es algo que esté de lado. En este momento, estas políticas ESG, políticas ambientales, sociales y de gobierno corporativo, ya son parte muy importante de algunos mercados que están impulsando la transición energética. Entonces, hay que ver de qué se tratan estos tres pilares de los criterios ESG. La E es por medio ambiente, environmental en inglés. Se refiere al planeta, a respetar el planeta. Y este es el principio de no hacer daño. Este principio de no hacer daño se enfatiza en reducir el impacto negativo en los recursos naturales. Entonces, para conservar la biodiversidad, combatir el cambio climático y ese tipo de acciones. Es muy importante que cumplamos con los acuerdos internacionales como el Acuerdo de París en mitigar las emisiones para poder mitigar las emisiones de CO2 y tener prácticas sustentables. La S es para social en inglés. Entonces aquí hablamos de la parte de la filantropía. Y esto realmente nos ayuda a enfocarnos en tener un compromiso y una integración de las comunidades, porque estas son las que pueden tener un impacto en las evaluaciones que hacemos. Y tenemos que tener también planes de desarrollo comunitarios. Esto ya no es opcional. Realmente son planes integrales para todo tipo de planeación energética. Esto nos asegura que las comunidades locales se pueden beneficiar de manera directa con un acercamiento de equidad de género, de igualdad de género. Y todos estos, hay un grupo muy grande de instrumentos internacionales que se enfocan en esa parte. La G es para gobernancia o gobierno corporativo en español. Y esto es enfatizar la importancia de la transparencia, el cumplimiento y la responsabilidad de las corporaciones. La G conecta el derecho medioambiental con con el gobierno corporativo. Y aquí son acuerdos que son más transparentes, reportes más entendibles y el pilar del gobierno corporativo nos asegura de que las compañías se están apegando a los estándares más altos que existan dentro de su operación. En resumen, cuando pensamos sobre los criterios ESG, estos impulsan el desarrollo y esto es como un tipo de barómetro para los inversionistas y los grupos de interés en términos de darle forma al futuro de las inversiones en recursos naturales. Siguiente diapositiva, por favor. ¿Cuáles son las fuentes de las obligaciones ESG? Tenemos globales, regionales y nacionales. Son los tres. Algunos de los instrumentos globales de los marcos globales son, por ejemplo, la Convención en Diversidad Biológica, CBD. También tenemos los principios de las Naciones Unidas. Y estos son algunos de los instrumentos internacionales con los que contamos. También tenemos la resolución A76L.75 de los derechos humanos a un medio ambiente limpio, saludable y sostenible. También tenemos un acercamiento del tipo de los principios de la Unión Africana. Y esto aquí tratan de maximizar los objetivos para apalancar su desarrollo. Entonces tienen estándares muy específicos. Tenemos la edición, las resoluciones de la Comisión Africana de 2023 y la Agenda 2663, que es el plan específico para transformar a África en un centro de desarrollo a nivel mundial. Ellos tienen un gran desarrollo para proteger su medio ambiente. Tenemos el Acuerdo de Escazú, que es uno de nuestros de los acuerdos de acceso a la información y participación a nivel latinoamericana, participación en la toma de decisiones, acceso a la justicia en, en, en temas de recursos naturales. Entonces, realmente aquí este es un muy buen punto para identificar cómo se relacionan los inversionistas con los grupos de interés multinacionales. Entonces, tenemos también los instrumentos nacionales, como la ley de la ley alemana de la ley alemana de cadena de producción. Entonces, tenemos consideraciones en obligaciones éticas, y esto viene en el ADN de la jurisprudencia relacionada. Entonces, aquí tenemos los procesos en donde vamos a priorizar los objetivos ESG, como adoptar nuevas tecnologías para poder evitar el daño a los recursos naturales y tratar de incrementar el bienestar de las comunidades. Y, por ejemplo, las compañías de energía realmente tienen que estar alineadas con los acuerdos internacionales y al mismo tiempo se tienen que estar alineadas con las leyes a nivel nacional. Siguiente diapositiva, por favor. Aquí tenemos que recordar la importancia crítica del cumplimiento y la adaptación cuando estamos viendo los principios ESG integrados en la gobernanza de los recursos naturales, específicamente en la transición para las energías limpias. El cumplimiento el día de hoy no es estático, es un campo sumamente dinámico que requiere de muchas estrategias para poder atacar los huecos legales y cualquier tipo de responsabilidad legal que se pueda modificar de manera muy rápida. Entonces, realmente aquí tenemos cambios en los procesos y cambios en los productos. ¿A qué me refiero con el cambio en los procesos? Eso es cuando, por ejemplo, hacemos el debido proceso apegados a los derechos humanos para poder diseñar nuestros proyectos y evaluaciones como una precondición. Entonces vamos a integrar los criterios ESG como una base para el cumplimiento de nuestros objetivos. Va a ser como un valor específico de manera adicional que también significa que es una forma de evitar el greenwashing para implementar mecanismos que sean medibles y verídicos. No vamos a utilizar, por ejemplo, contratos que no puedan divulgarse en el público, y tenemos mecanismos muy amplios para resolver disputas. El cambio en el producto es cuando mejoramos los productos, los servicios y nuestras prácticas, y estas están alineadas con las normas y las leyes. Aquí es en donde incorporamos innovaciones como tecnologías para reducir la huella de carbono o métodos que sean más amigables con el medio ambiente. Ahí es en donde aplicamos un cambio en el producto. Para diferentes países, para los diferentes grupos de interés, ¿qué significa ser adaptables? Bueno, ser adaptables es ser fuertes con sus marcos legales nacionales, cumplir con sus compromisos internacionales y al mismo tiempo lo que queremos hacer es salvaguardar la soberanía sobre recursos críticos. Entonces, los compromisos nacionales e internacionales son muy importantes y están a la misma altura de la protección de la soberanía de nuestros recursos. Un aspecto de esto que es muy importante en términos de la adaptación es realmente invitar a la cooperación regional, a iniciativas como la Agenda Africana 2063 para estandarizar todos los estándares y promover el crecimiento económico. También promover las tecnologías verdes y atraer inversionistas que quieran trabajar en proyectos verdes. Entonces, tenemos que tener un desarrollo que se adapte a la medida de los inversionistas, de nuestras necesidades. También tenemos que tener una habilidad para reentrenar a nuestros trabajadores y tener iniciativas de desarrollo de talento. Tenemos que ajustar todas las capacitaciones que estemos dando al respecto de las energías renovables. En conclusión, el cumplimiento va de la mano con con la flexibilidad, con la innovación dentro de las estrategias ESG. Entonces aquí tenemos diferentes países, diferentes grupos de interés que pueden alcanzar la gobernanza de los recursos naturales de manera ética con los criterios ESG y alcanzar la neta cero. Siguiente diapositiva, por favor. Gracias. También También me gustaría hablarles de las siguientes diapositivas que tienen que ver con la equidad de género. Hay algunos riesgos que tenemos que enfrentar que son clave en la transición a la neta cero. Ya hablé un poco de los criterios ESG, pero ahora vamos a hablar de los riesgos que enfrenta la parte de equidad de género. Algunos de los primeros son el acceso igualitario a, a oportunidades. Sé que hay barreras sistémicas muy específicas en términos de acceso a la educación, al comercio, las finanzas, roles de liderazgo en el sector de la energía renovable. Y las mujeres han enfrentado una inclusión limitada, particularmente en sectores específicos, en el sector de la energía solar, de la energía eólica, y estos son mercados en donde hemos encontrado muchas restricciones para tener equidad en la participación de la economía verde. En segundo lugar, también tenemos impacto económico desproporcional para las mujeres dentro de las comunidades. En las comunidades ellas son las más afectadas cuando se dan estos cambios en energía, estos cambios en el uso de la energía, especialmente en aquellos lugares que usan la energía tradicional para su existencia. Entonces aquí hay políticas específicas que pueden mitigar la disparidad de ingresos. Entonces tenemos también barreras culturales y sociales. Hay muchas barreras de estereotipos y de género que excluyen a las mujeres de participar en la parte de gobernanza de la energía. También hay expectativas culturales que pueden limitar el rol de la mujer en el desarrollo de infraestructura y tecnología de energía verde. Entonces también tenemos que hablar de los riesgos de salud. Las mujeres y los niños también son más afectados por estos riesgos de salud Y esto viene de fuentes de energía ineficientes como el humo dentro de las casas, por ejemplo, o la gente que cocina con leña, que está muy expuesta a al humo y a las toxinas, y la degradación del medio ambiente y la escasez de recursos que es causada por estos proyectos energéticos, más allá, en vez de tener fuentes de energía renovable, es lo que hace que estas comunidades sean todavía más vulnerables. Estos riesgos de género también son afectados por muchísimos otros factores, ubicación geográfica, por mencionar alguno de ellos. Entonces, aquí necesitamos tener intervenciones a la medida. Y creo que podemos ir a la siguiente diapositiva. ¿Cuáles son las obligaciones? Las obligaciones internacionales de los derechos humanos y de los instrumentos medioambientales. Este es un ejemplo de la UDHR, que es la Declaración Universal de los Derechos Humanos, la ICESCR. Aquí hay muchos compromisos para la igualdad de género y para los derechos culturales. Específicamente hablamos del artículo 75 del Acuerdo de París, en donde en este artículo manda a que se resuelvan las situaciones de equidad de género, y también tenemos la declaración de la UNESCO, y todos estos están muy relacionados con la equidad de género como tema central. A nivel regional, en África, por ejemplo, tenemos la Carta Africana en Derechos Humanos y Derechos del Pueblo, específicamente el artículo 22.1, que reconoce el derecho de todos los individuos a tener un desarrollo económico, social, enfocado en la igualdad. También el protocolo de Maputo, que protege los derechos de las mujeres de manera específica y que las integra en los proyectos medioambientales y de energías renovables. Siguiente, por favor. ¿Cómo vamos a solucionar estos problemas en la transición a la meta cero, net zero? ¿Cuáles son uno de los elementos más importantes? Es la legislación y los marcos jurídicos. Tenemos que desarrollar leyes que sean explícitas sobre la equidad de género. Y esto es para la protección y la promoción de los derechos de las mujeres dentro de la cadena de valor de la energía. También tenemos que integrar principios de respuesta de género para el cambio climático y la transición energética dentro de las estrategias, y que reconozcan a las mujeres como generadoras de cambio. Tenemos que tener una estrategia más completa o estrategias que sean coherentes, y necesitamos alinear nuestros compromisos con los programas Net Zero para tener políticas claras. Por ejemplo, La estrategia del Reino Unido de Net Zero tiene principios de equidad de género en el mapa de la sustentabilidad. Es muy específico. Porque esto expandir el acceso a la educación para mujeres y niñas. Esto les da muchas habilidades. Esto las empodera para poder ser las siguientes lideresas en el sector de los energéticos renovables. Y aquí tenemos programas de creación de capacidad, estos enfocados en la participación activa de las mujeres en proyectos a todos niveles. Y tenemos un acercamiento, una evaluación más integral de cuáles son las disparidades, dónde tenemos las barreras en la búsqueda de la equidad de género en la transición energética. Para entender esto, tendremos que
monitorear y reportar estas brechas para poder llevar un registro del proceso que se está llevando. También se necesita la rendición de cuenta y liderazgo corporativo, asimismo las colaboraciones. Debemos dar pie a una colaboración internacional. Hay que compartir las mejores prácticas entre nosotros. Los recursos son varios. Si buscamos una transición energética, debe tener una respuesta de género. Creo que eso nos va a dar la mayor ventaja si lo que buscamos es utilizar las iniciativas globales y regionales para sobreponernos a las barreras sistemáticas. Lo que queremos al final del día es una mejor transición para todos. Gracias. Gracias, Elena. Creo que es el turno del profesor José Juan González. Gracias, Íñigo. Solo quiero hacer dos observaciones. Creo que hay dos ideas que quiero presentarle a la audiencia. Debo mencionar que este libro fue lanzado este mayo en la Universidad de Senado en Colombia.
Elena, I cannot hear you, José Juan.
¿Me pueden escuchar aquí en la sala? ¿Me escuchan? Diego, ¿me escuchan aquí? No escuchamos. ¿Qué tal ahora? Como decía Íñigo, este libro fue presentado en abril en la Universidad de Senado en Colombia, después en la Universidad de Harvard en Boston, en agosto en la una universidad en Hong Kong, China. Créanme, hace unos momentos también se presentó en Nigeria. Es una agenda que no duerme. Lo segundo que quiero mencionar es que aquí tenemos a otro de los fundadores del grupo, el profesor Alastair Lucas. Voy a hablar un poco sobre este capítulo. No puedo extenderme por el tiempo. Yo contribuí a este libro con el capítulo 18, pero debo reconocer al mismo tiempo a Ana Pacheco, que está aquí en la sala, quien también es coautora de este capítulo. Es importante porque ella está a cargo de un programa estudiantil. Pienso yo que eso es lo que se debe hacer con los alumnos, escribir junto a ellos en libros de este tipo. Solo quiero mencionar un par de cosas más. En este capítulo, el nuestro, hablamos de las conexiones entre las leyes comerciales internacionales y las leyes ambientales internacionales. Porque en este capítulo explicamos que en la región norteamericana se encuentra uno de los bloques económicos más poderosos del mundo, pero al mismo tiempo, Norteamérica es uno de los más grandes contribuidores.
The MD is switched off. Now,
¿Ya me escuchan?
José Juan, since we cannot hear you,
José Juan, debido a que no podemos.
I wonder whether you want me to go to the conclusions or...
¿Prefieren que saltemos a las conclusiones?
Okay. So please, could you please go back to the slides, to the last 4 slides with the...
¿Podemos regresar a las últimas 4 diapositivas para las conclusiones, por favor?
Okay. Just a couple of, or some very few ideas about...
Muy bien, un par de ideas finales para concluir los resultados de nuestra investigación. Uno de los principales problemas que hemos tenido de llegar a la meta cero a un nivel global es la fragmentación regulatoria. Estamos en un tiempo para nuevas políticas energéticas y ambientales del meta cero. Necesitamos, para que estas políticas tengan éxito, se requiere de una unificación del marco regulatorio. Eso significa que hoy en día no hay estándares globales sobre la meta cero. Existe una desconexión entre los objetivos de la meta cero con la legislación de recursos naturales, en contraste con los marcos de trabajo internacionales. Hay un alza del proteccionismo y del aislamiento por parte de las potencias mundiales. Esto va a provocar una ralentización del progreso hacia las metas, los objetivos de la meta cero. Vemos también que muchas jurisdicciones no tienen el marco legal necesario para integrar nuevas tecnologías como el CCUS u otras. Esta última diapositiva contiene 5 recomendaciones que están repartidas en diferentes capítulos del libro, así como en el último, que es un capítulo comparativo. Lo que necesitamos es integrar instrumentos legales. Necesitamos también hacer una fusión y una promoción de la colaboración tanto nacional como institucional, internacional a nivel institucional. Los bloques regionales también deben compartir su información sobre las mejores prácticas. Debemos dar pie a soluciones tecnológicas y energéticas para los problemas relacionados a las emisiones de dióxido de carbono que solo se incrementan. Asimismo, se necesita una cooperación y coordinación internacional. Esto está en coordinación con todo lo que han dicho los ponentes hasta ahora. No se debe ignorar el principal mensaje del libro, el cual es que necesitamos reducir las emisiones de CO2. Es algo necesario, indispensable para llegar a una economía de meta cero en los próximos años. Y para esto, la ley está altamente involucrada. es totalmente necesaria para reducir las emisiones. Se necesita de las instituciones. Serán de gran ayuda si están en el lugar y momento correctos. Muchas gracias por permitirnos presentar este libro y muchas felicitaciones por este congreso.
Gracias.
No hay problema. Elena y yo no hemos podido escucharte, pero no hay ningún problema. Sin embargo, nos gustaría agradecerle a todos de gran manera por darnos esta oportunidad y queremos felicitarte, profesor José, a ti, a tu importante trabajo editorial. Así que muchas gracias de nuevo. Muchas gracias por todas tus contribuciones a este capítulo y por el trabajo que has prestado. Estamos muy felices y muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Felicidades, José Juan. Es momento de una pausa. Vamos un poco atrasados.
Buenos días a todas y todos aquí.
Good morning, everyone. For those who are following us in the live stream, we want to thank you for being here with us during the I feel joy being here. Professor, I told the professor that I'm more than glad to moderate. From the professor's introduction. Professor Santiago Oñate was born in Mexico City. He's a diplomat, politician, and Mexican lawyer. He got a degree in the Mexican law in the UNAM law faculty in 1972, which he got a honorary mention. After grad studies in Italy, in the UK, he started working as a full-time professor in 1975 in this university in Azcapotzalco unit as part of the law department, the same one that I'm leading at the moment. He worked as a chief of criminal law. In 1988, he had a master class at UNAM. He was also a federal congressman. And what was known as the F at the moment, who was elected into office as part of the PRI party during he was part of the International Affairs Department in the Luis Donaldo Colossio's team. And he was also part of the National Executive Committee from 1995 to 1996. He was also working in the Federal Office of the Environment from 1992 to 1993. Was chief of the Presidential Office in 1994 and Secretariat of Work and Social Prevention from 1994 to 1995. As a diplomat, he's been a permanent representative in the American State Organization. From 1997 to 2001, he was the ambassador in the United Kingdom. He was also the Mexican ambassador. He was the representative in the International Court of Justice in the Avena case. He was also in charge of the Chemical Weapon Prevention Committee. In August 2013, he was part of European Committee, and finally, until May 2022, he was the coordinator of the crime recognition related to the chemical weapons identification in the Arab Republic and Syria. He's also author of several case studies in several countries. So, Professor, it's an honor to have you here. I'm truly glad to be here with you today. I'm glad to be back with you at UAM. And it's my first time in this camp. is how thankful I am with the organizers of this event, particularly with Dr. Jose Juan González Marquez and Dr. Alicia Solini. This due to the invitation they handed to me to be here with you today. It is very important for me to be here with you in the 50th anniversary of UAM establishment, a university where I have had the honor of participating in the law department as a professor from 1975 to 1992. Those were some enriching years in both my. Now, for this presentation, I need to confess something. When Dr. Jose Juan González Marquez handed me the invitation, I felt flattered. It had been a while since I last contacted UAM. Once I took a look to the topic of this colloquium, I have to be honest, I felt afraid. Human rights, yes, I know them, but I haven't dealt with them directly in the recent past. So the question was, what can I do? How can my recent work be useful here? What can I include in this seminar or meetup? So for this presentation, I chose the title Judicial Regime on Chemical Weapons. Now, it may seem strange for you that if this is a colloquium centered on human rights protection and environment defense, my approach was towards chemical weapons and retreating arms. In this world we're living, increasing war conflicts in which state interests are normally imposed, mass destruction weapons approaches to a situation where we could all lose it all. This is fundamental if we want to guarantee human rights. Without peace, the right to life, the right to health, the right to freedom, they all turned into chimeras when there is no peace. WMDs, both biological, chemical, or nuclear, are a threat not only for human lives, but for ecosystems as well. Thus, the relevance of chemical weapons control, both for the threat towards human rights and the environment. As many of you know, disarmament has been a main goal of every organism in charge of keeping peace and international security. So, for the UN, from its very beginning in 1945, which is 30 years before the establishment of UAM, from that very moment, the decreasement and eventual disappearance of nuclear WMDs, chemical weapons, and a ban on biological weapons have all been seen as core priorities. Now, how has the UN expressed this interest towards building a situation where disarmament is possible? Well, there have been several law approaches. Now, the development has not been even so far. It depends all on the type of WMD. Now, we have to take a look at the legal statutes about WMDs.
Regarding nuclear weapons, which are the most dangerous, with no question, due to the destructive effects in the surroundings that it has. Even though these are really dangerous, and since the first moment they have been considered as a central axis for the efforts of the UN, not a lot has been done up to this point. The Non-Proliferation Treaty, the Tlatelolco. The Tlatelolco Treaty from 1968, we have two categories. 1967, sorry. Those are states who have nuclear weapons, the states that manufacture and use nuclear weapons before the 1st of January 1967. Who are they? China, France, Russia, UK, and the USA. On the other hand, all the other countries. This distinction is important because it is established in the treaty that we have different obligations for different states, depending on the groups that you are. The states that hold nuclear power, the main commitment is not to assist, not to thrive, or not to induce any other states for the nuclear weapon production. On the other hand, the non-nuclear states are committed to not to develop or to purchase nuclear weapons. Here, there is an element missing: prohibition. The prohibition of the use of these weapons. It is not prohibited on the treaty. We could discuss whether if it is or not related to the international standards, but we talk about the trading, circulation, acquisition, testing, and development on nuclear weapons. It is not a treaty that has penalties for the use or prohibits the use of nuclear weapons. It only protects us from the non-proliferation. Therefore, its name, right? So, all the obligations that the states has regarding this treaty is related to an international organization, the International Atomic Energy.
Frecuentemente conocida como IAEA por sus siglas en inglés. Este organismo que tiene su
The IAEA, that has its headquarters in Austria, foresees the compliance of the Tlatelolco treatment, that there is no trading or exchange or the creation of nuclear weapons.
Internacional sobre las armas nucleares.
The Prohibition Treaty of nuclear testing in the space and the water. The last aspect, the testing in water, is relevant for the conservation of the natural resources, the protection of the ecosystems. As many of you know, in the aquatic space that covers 2/3 of our globe, there are areas that are under jurisdiction of the river states, but there are wide areas that are out of the control of these states. To forbid the nuclear testings in these international waters has a finality of environmental protection. This is the sunny side of the street, right? This is the sunny side of this treaty. It was signed by 187 states and ratified by 168. This do not has the ratification of states that the treaty states that are mandatory. We go again over the same line: China, Russia, USA, Israel, Syria, Egypt, Pakistan, India, and Iran. These states have not neither signed nor ratified this treaty. As long as they don't do it, this treaty won't be in effect. The development of the treaty was done by the CTBTO. This is an organization in Vienna that works under the scheme of a preparatory body for the enforcement. They don't have the power to penalize. It provides technical assistance and consultancy, but nothing more. Finally, I would like to mention the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons adopted in 2017 that is in effect since 2020. This treaty, without any question, the most recent of the instruments of disarmament, it's a wide effort to build a commitment. But pay attention to this. It is not a legal commitment. It is more of a political nature to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons, but without any legal or technical measures to achieve the prohibition of nuclear weapons. In a few words, it is just a declaration of goodwill that most of the UN members have adhered to, but that we do not consider it as a legal instrument because it is just a treaty. They could have used any other name that could fit better as a declaration or a manifest, but sometimes this is the way things work in the UN. Remember that the chemical weapons were used since ancient times, but the indiscriminated use didn't happen until the Great War in Europe. Are weapons that use pathogens that can damage that can damage both humans and animals. The disease coming from the chemical weapons do not know of borders. Once that they are used in a country, they can go to the next country freely with their effects. Are from 1972 by the Convention of Biological Weapons and Toxins that transfer the storage and use of this kind of weapons. Different from the nuclear weapons, here we have a legal expression that prohibits them. This is the first multilateral disarmament agreement, but it is important to mention. Let's go to the dark side of the street. Its efficiency depends very much on the implementation at domestic level of verification. Prohibition of production, development, trading, and use of biological weapons are reserved to each of the different states. There is no mechanism that helps us to have an international intervention, not talking about sending an army, but to have a participation of the international community just to verify that the disarmament has been done by any other state party. Well, now let's talk about the chemical weapons. The chemical weapons, as well as the biological weapons, certainly are the oldest. Particularly chemical weapons you can find examples of use of chemical weapons in the Peloponnesian Wars from the 15th century. There are trustworthy sources of the existence between the Roman Empire and the Second Persian Empire. In the Kiev Rus, we also have examples between the Ukrainians and Polish people. Now, Kiev is very relevant today, so there are a lot of points to take into account when we talk about that part of the world. I'm going to talk about examples. During the First World War, they found a niche to be used. The efforts to regulate, prohibit from the legal perspective its use also have a long tradition. The first treaty on the subject was celebrated in 1675. Imagine that. It was ages ago. This is a Strasbourg Treaty, where between France and Germany prohibiting the use of, sorry, it was in 1975. We have the I Convention of 1989. 27 countries signed this agreement, but also it included China, Japan, United States, Persia, and Mexico that appear for the first time in an international disarmament treaty. In 1899, they expressly renounced to use projectiles that has as a main goal to disperse toxic gases, a new conception for chemical weapons. This important convention was not able to prevent that chemical weapons appeared again during the Great War from 1914 to 1918. In August 1914, the French army was the first army to use gas grenades with Sitka bromure just to force the German troops to get off their bunkers. France didn't think back in the day that the German response would be of a never-seen-before magnitude. Germans continued with the production of chemical weapons that were more advanced and using by using the mustard gas. Also, the British would start to use suffocating gases. The use of chemical substances as weapons during the First World War caused more than 1 million victims. 100,000 of them were decisions.
¿Cuál era la población de los estados belligerantes? En el caso de Francia, el número
In the case of France, the number of victims, those with permanent injuries was notable, and it extended up to the 1950s. This again made the countries to reflect that affect the general population as well as soldiers. Once the chemical weapon is used and the gases are dispersed, it is not possible to confine the effects just to the front enemy. They go around the city, they affect the population. which, regarding the guidelines of the right to war, is considered something that should be under control. Again, after the incident of between 1914 and 1918, in 1925, we got a meeting by the countries in Geneva to condemn the use of chemical weapons. Chemical weapons that were used during this conflict essentially were chemical products that existed in the market, such as chloride, phosphine, hydrogen, sulfur. All these products are of easy access that were dispersed through grenades or projectiles, artillery projectiles. These are really simple to produce, cheap to produce, and with wide effects. The commitment of 1925, it was acquired by 38 countries and signed by 70. It was not that efficient. Many of the states that ratified it made it ratified with a reserve. And that reserve was to use chemical weapons as a retaliation if someone else uses them against us. Once that someone uses it, everybody could use them. So this Geneva Protocol did not prohibit expressly neither the production or the storage of chemical weapons, that continue to be for a long time. Let me correct, not only in the European countries that developed it originally, but outside Europe. They start Asia, and the Midwestern countries started having this. The legal limitations that I put on this, that I mentioned about these instruments, is that little by little we started developing a consciousness of rejection towards chemical weapons. And the countries and communities were against the use of the chemical weapons. Why? Because there was an universal disapproval. The military development in the 40s and the 50s of the 20th centuries is a development that puts the chemical weapons in a lack of relevance in the strategies. So the big powers just went for other kind of weapons. One of the effects of the chemical weapons that cause them to be prohibited is that once that they are used, the effects are subject to the wind. When you, let's say that you shell Zacatecas 94, and the gas is going to be all around, it can go to the next block, and then it will affect the people in the next block. But if wind blows counterwise, it will affect the other people on the other side. Let's put it in simple words. Something like a tear gas. Is that a chemical weapon used by the police? Why do the policemen always wear masks? Well, to protect from wind, because they could be victims of their own felony, right? So, chemical weapons are starting to be considered as something to be prohibited. The wider consciousness on The immorality of this kind of weapons makes the community to negotiate and to test the Convention on Chemical Weapons that were enforced in 1997, went into force in 1997. The exact title is so long. It is the Convention on Prohibition on Development, Production, Storage, and Use of Chemical Weapons. It's an agreement that is unique and different from the ones that I have mentioned at an international legal framework on disarming. In the first place, into prohibiting a full category of mass destruction weapons. Secondly, in taking care of for seeking the destruction of the chemical weapons. It is not only not to use them, but to destroy them. It establishes an international organism
encargado de asegurar el cumplimiento de la convención por los Estados
the APAC
mediante un sistema de inspecciones
through a system of inspections, technical inspections to disarm these countries, the OPCW. This was negotiated in a multilateral framework, transparent, and something really important, with the participation from the beginning to the end of the chemical industry. Why the chemical industry? Well, because these weapons can be fabricated from the misuse of chemical products. So it was necessary to include the chemical industry, something that has happened during the last 25 years since this convention has been into place. The main elements of this convention are the generic concept of chemical weapon that is understood as any toxic substance that, due to its reaction over the human beings, can cause death, permanent damage, temporary damage in people or animals. There are a few international instruments that take care of the animals. It does not distinguish between different races, different kinds. No, it talks about the animals in general, all of them. Another feature of this convention is the absolute obligation in terms of international law, with no exception and without the possibility to have a reserve to use, develop, produce, store, transfer chemical weapons to any state, person, or group of people. Pay attention to this. It is not only talking about states. Now we're talking individuals and groups of people. I will deep dive into this later. But it establishes the use of the chemical weapons. There are no reserves. There is an absolute obligation of getting rid of all the chemical weapons in their possession or that are in any place under their control or jurisdiction. You can say, this sounds a little bit weird, but it is not. The first hypothesis is that, let's say, Russia or the United States, they have the chemical weapons production centers. They have them. These are under their control and jurisdiction. But there are some other cases, such as, for example, I'm saying all this information has been disclosed up to this point, so I'm saying no secret. But Panama, did they produce chemical weapons? No. But did they have an arsenal in one of their islands that was used by the Americans? They had a testing center in one of the Panama Islands? Yes. We have a lot of problems. There is a legal maze to be solved when we talk about this. So Panama would say, why would I be penal? Why is there a penalty on me if I didn't do it? So we need to work it out, you know? Also, the anti-riot agents shouldn't be used as instruments or war procedures. Most of the countries use tear gas as a mechanism to keep the public safety, right? But the prohibition is that it is used in war. Tear gas shouldn't be used in war. So this is where we dot the I's and cross the T's, right? So by the end of the last century, there was a theater in Moscow where Chechenian terrorists took the theater, they took hostages, and the Russian police intervenes. Up to this day, we don't know. We don't know what kind of gas they used, but up to this day, we don't know. But there were a lot of dead people. At least 170 people passed away. It has been questioned. There are some other states that says, well, that something could be used to war or not depends on the moment. Countries such as India, Sri Lanka, they use them with rebel groups, quotation marks. So is that war? Isn't that war? So these are really specific cases that are really interesting. So all the states are part of the Convention of Chemical Weapons. They need to adopt in the national legislation the guidelines to allow them to comply with the mandatory articles in it. This is an element of the international law. It states obligations and responsibilities towards the states, not towards the people. Who can enforce them towards people? The states. That's the obligation of the party state to adopt internal measures, domestic measures. In our case, it is a criminal code where we have the use of chemical weapons established and the penalties for its use. Right? I don't know if I have enough time. Do I have enough time? Just you are running a little bit late, but you are on time. You shouldn't worry. But okay. So I just made a general description of the contents of this convention. It is important to mention and to review what has been the efficiency of it, what has been its contribution to move forward in disarmament in the 27 years that it has been enforced. As you lawmakers know, it is something that we lawyers, we run away from it. We are satisfied and happy when we see new guidelines, but do that work? Does it have a result? I will not avoid this situation here. The first point, the convention aspires to rule around the world. It means that to reach universality, what we call it in the common law, right? So 163 party states are part of this convention. Few states are not signatories of this, but these are Israel that signed the convention, but they haven't ratified it. Egypt, North Korea, and South Sudan. Between Egypt and Israel, there's a game, a horse race where they say you do it first, and then you say no, you do it first. With this, I mean that currently the Chemical Weapon Convention means that 98% of the world population, 98% of the world population lives under the regime of this convention, which is an achievement with no question. The destruction of the chemical weapons in around 25 years, those countries that declare to have possession of chemical weapons, which we highlight the USA, Russia, Libya, Syria, Japan, China, Albania, and some other countries that that has less number of weapons. They have destroyed under the international certification more than 72,000 metric tons of chemical weapons and 74 chemical weapons production. This is a never seen before effort. When I say under the surveillance of the international actors, I mean that the destruction of the chemical weapons on the specialized centers for that goal has been done with the permanent presence of inspectors of the O of the OPCW, and should they have any questions on the mechanisms, well, they can consult them and they get technical support. It is important to mention this. It is also important to mention that the convention procures that chemistry is used for peaceful means. How do we achieve this? We verify that the industries to make sure that the chemical substances and its precursors are produced, developed, and used only for non-military purposes. The chemical industry is also subject to an inspection regime. I'm going to mention an example that I think that lawyers can even lawyers can understand. A chemical substance is chloride. Chloride is something necessary for human life. It has various uses for potable water. You can get it any corner drugstore. But they surveil to who do they sell chloride, in which amounts. We need to verify who we sell chloride to. What have we done in the last 25 years with chloride? Well, we have run more than 25,000 industrial inspections in more than 100 countries. This is another complex regime, but that is complex for many, many countries. It is of huge benefit. Some others understand it as unnecessary paperwork. It depends very much on the country. But you say, what about Mexico? Well, we're under inspection. Because Pemex is always under inspection. Pemex is subject to this kind of inspections.
Now, relating internal legal instrument adoptions which can ensure observance of this convention by individuals, well, out of 193 countries that have signed and ratified this convention, 128, bit more than half, have the adequate laws for this purpose. 33 of them have initial measures, 32 don't have them yet. They say they are preparing it, but some of them have been at it for years. But why does this take so long? Well, if we look at it from the national legislation point of view, making laws to prohibit chemical weapons in Mexican soil does not possess, is not appealing, is not easy to sell. Does not win you elections. No one says, oh, people say, I don't know anything about this treaty. I don't know why they signed it, really. This creates difficulties for countries. And situation. It was recognized in 2013 when PAC received the Nobel Prize for Peace. But OPCW is an organization made out of people. There are around 500 staff members. Most of them are inspectors who come from, and according to our data, they come from 90 countries around the world. Every country has a right to propose candidates who are selected through a contest. I mean, if you have the question, yes, Mexico is part of it, yes.
Casi permanentemente.
And it has had 2 to 5 inspectors of very high rank almost permanently from the chemical science faculty, people who have held the name in a high position, held Mexico's name in a high position.
También viene el otro punto. Bueno, ¿cuánto cuesta este asunto?
But another question is, how much is it, right? It's a trendy question nowadays. Well, OPCW spends 80 million euros per year. Is that a lot? Is that a few? I mean, for us at a personal level, it's very little, right? But for an international institution, it's very little. Think about it. Nowadays, there are more than 2,000 international institutions. There are more institutions than countries. Medium budgets go from 250 millions and up. So far, we have been efficient, we have worked well, but let me conclude. Yes, there's still work to do. We say that purpose of destruction has been accomplished. Last year, we managed to destroy everything that was declared. But the challenge today is for non-government agents who have participated, who have begun manufacturing and developing chemical weapons such as jihad groups, terrorist groups. They have all participated in this process. What is the meaning of this? They're not following the rules. The states where this is happening are not following the rules. I don't want to give any names, but let's say we have X state with a group using chemical weapons. Whose responsibility is that? The state. What tools do they have? Well, the laws that they should have approved. If they don't, that's on them. It's evidence that such state is not protecting its citizens, which is their first labor, their first responsibility, according to Hoff. And again, importantly, this is happening. I want to make a reference to my last experience with OPCW, Syria and Libya. At a certain point, they are affected due to social movements that look for a change of regime. I don't want to get deeper into that, but governments react. These states have weapons. Americans know that Syria and Libya have chemical weapons, and they threat with projects similar to the Iraq invasion. I mean, there were no weapons found, but it was their excuse. Gaddafi and Libya get ahead and say, before you say anything, I'll subscribe, I'm going to sign this treaty. Come, destroy. They earned some time. Syria did not do the same. Syria took its time. It wasn't until the conflict grew so big that both American and Russian said, we're not going to intervene as long as you accept and declare your own chemical weapons. Syria says, okay. They destroyed their chemical weapons. They didn't use Syrian money. Of course, they used Norse money mainly. But it turns out there are still chemical weapons in Syria. They forgot to declare them. That's the official version. They forgot. They're in the middle of a war where it's pretty difficult to know what there is and what there isn't. There are no records because they were burned. The fact is, they are there and they are being used. It represents a challenge for the organization. It is an intervention is necessary at this point. So when talking about provisions that are included in both regional and international treaties, it is within our own perception, legal perception, that we need to think about the sanctions of not following the norms. We're talking about crimes after all. So we need to rely on criminal law. Is there an available criminal law? Yes, the national codes of each country. But some of you may say, what if countries don't endorse it? Well, there's the International Court of Justice in Hague. Can they prosecute these crimes? I hope the answer doesn't disappoint you. Yes and no. Yes, because the Rome Statute did not refer to the Chemical Weapons Convention. However, it refers to screening gas. So there may be a legal framework to work on this, but why didn't it proceed? Because in the Rome Statute, countries such as Israel, who never ratified this, say, don't include this. I don't agree with it. If you do that, you will block me from implementing the International Criminal Court procedures. And at the end of the day, they didn't do anything. But they managed to dilute the treaty effects. Many other countries did the same. So the laws exist. Possibility for sanction exists. According to the international law, yes. And under the same procedures, it does. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. If there are any other questions, I'll be more than glad to answer.
Muchas gracias, doctor. Sí, hay un par de...
Thank you very much, Doctor. I think there are a couple of questions that I will read.
La primera es, ante las...
First questions. This.
De la destrucción de la naturaleza.
What can we do? Right, this is one of the main worries that we have. That the question is how to react, how to stop destruction the very next day. It may vary, depending on if it's a nuclear, biological, or chemical weapon. Nuclear. There's no way to reestablish things as they were before the explosion. For biological and chemical weapons, there are certain ways to respond and react to the use of them. For biological weapons, also for chemical, immediate chemical treatment towards victims is the first thing. Now, is it possible? Depends on the case. Let's talk about chemical weapon use in Syria in recent years. It happened in a small village, and they just block that side. Nobody can go in or out. So it's impossible for people to receive the immediate response they need. Regarding nature, animals, the same that with humans. If they can be treated, vaccinated, or receive an antidote, then yes, they may stay alive. But nature, as we know it, can only deal with we can only deal through remediation procedures, which are expensive. And this is beyond the possibilities of a country that may have problems with chemical weapons. Let's talk about the United States alone. There's this Spring Valley community in the outskirts of Washington. They realized chemical weapons had been buried in there between two wars. And they were building housing in there. The government agencies said there can be no housing, there can be no schools in here. It's still a dangerous area. So remediation efforts took years and millions of dollars. But they were only done because it was close to Washington. They haven't done the same thing in Arizona. So it depends on the place. I don't really know if this answers your question.
Muchas gracias. Ya podemos repetir.
Thank you. We'll see if there is a reply to that. There are second and third questions. So what's the most optimal response towards chemical weapons, and how long will it take to vote it? If your answer is that we shall have a law bill or a proposal of a treaty. Well, when talking about our country, the Chemical Weapon Convention is a valid law. It has been signed and ratified by Mexico, and it is part of the treaties to which Mexico has signed. As I mentioned previously, member states have the obligation to implement at a national level every law that allows the implementation of these rules. Mexico took its time. It wasn't until the late 90s that certain additions to the criminal code were approved. These additions have set provisions in them. So yes, the tools are there. But it is necessary to include new ones. It is necessary to include new treaties. Let's separate it. First, new laws. I'm sorry, I cannot comment on this. I cannot tell you on the precise implementation of the Mexican laws. I haven't been here for many years. So this is an answer that should be given by the national authority for the compliance of chemical weapon rules. Now, I think the names are different, but I remember this was under the responsibilities of CISEN, a little bit on the Foreign Affairs Office. So it's an agency that has changes location with every term. They are the ones to say if we need new rules or not. But the question of how long will it take for Congress to approve it? I don't know. I mean, Congress is working fast these days, so maybe they could. For international treaties, we don't really need a new one. What we need is to comply with the one we have. And on a personal opinion, expand the International Criminal Court competence. There was an attempt in the Rome Statute in Kampala more than 10 years ago. There was no success. Despite the efforts from Latin America, lots of efforts by Latin America. Thank you. And finally, we know this is not directly related,
referencia a las armas
Could you reference small weapons?
porque el tema México?
Pero mire,
Does it matter to Mexico?
de manera deliberada, no me referí.
Well, I purposely avoided radiological weapons because first, I do not know them that much and the rules are confusing. And I did not refer to small weapons. The latter, because for me, they are not part of WMDs. And they are not contemplated by international organizations. And now, are they important? Yes, they are, a lot. For Mexico, even more. Why? Phenomena that we all know. Weapon trafficking from our northern neighbor, trafficking towards drug cartels. Cartels that very frequently have better weapons than the forces of order. They have been working on this for a long time. Mexico, the United States have been working on this. There are not international organizations yet, but if I recall correctly, there are 3 trials going on in the American courts with the purpose of stopping weapon trafficking, but I did not talk about it now. Yes, there are tools given by international organizations, but one of its characteristics of these international organizations is that they discuss everything. There's a disarm convention in Geneva held every year, and you can discuss every topic in there. Thank you very much, Doctor. But unfortunately, time is limited for academic purposes, but we want to thank you for accepting our invitation, and we just hope we can reflect on this topic, which is so relevant during the present Ukraine-Russia conflict. Sadly, humanity has found in war the way to keep peace. Thank you very much, Professor. Before we stand up, again, that this university, your university, social sciences, and the law departments have granted you this document recognizing your participation in this event.
Internacional, Perspectiva de los derechos humanos. Pero además me ha pedido de manera especial.
I have also been asked in a special form by both the Master's Coordination, a little gift for you, and this text, the text that has been presented in the Coloquio framework. Our colleague, Jose Juan González Marquez, is part of the authors. And this is our gift for you. So let's stand up. Thank you very much. Es una prueba, prueba al canal español, 1, 2, 1, 2, es una prueba, prueba al canal de español.
Háblale a la...
Prueba, prueba,
Dale.
prueba, seguimos probando, 1, 2, prueba, 1, 2, 3, 4, prueba, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Prueba en el canal de español, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. In 2047, 2021, the Council observed that more than 35 party states have made it part of its resolution, laws, or national policies. At the same time, it has ratified the rights of each party member and exhorted states to provide with a solution towards media problems with a focus on human rights. Political, social, and economical rights are based on each other and work hand in hand.
Si me pongo en canal inglés, no oigo. Sonido directo.
Nos dice ahí si oye.
English channel sound check, English channel sound check. This is an English channel sound check. Sound check, English channel, sound check. This is a test, a sound check, English channel. And we continue with the test, English channel. This is English, speaking to English, English channel, English channel sound check, English channel sound check. If you are able to listen to this, please let us know. English channel sound check. ¿Qué se puede encargar? English channel sound check. Ay, señor. English channel sound check, English channel sound check.
Todo aquí.
English channel sound check. English channel, English channel. So are we done? Hello.
Vamos a dar inicio con la siguiente mesa.
Let's begin with our next table, and we want to extend our greetings to all participants here in this room. Welcome. Welcome to everyone who is online as well, both in Mexico and other countries. We want to give you a warm welcome and want to thank you for participating. Welcome to this table with the name The Human Right to Sustainability. As you probably know, we have kind of stopped. If we talk about human right to sustainability, we're not talking about the most common things. We study human rights, correct, in the most basic form, which is protection of all the rights of people, of human beings. But if you want to expand it towards the environment, we may think it's not related to humans anymore. So there's kind of a resistance towards a possible reflection on nature's rights. We think of nature as an object with no rights, but we'll see that such a phrase can really conciliate these two dimensions that may seem distant but are not. That's why we have the participation of our presenters today. I will introduce them in a second. We'll see that it's possible to work with both of them towards the benefit not only of humans, but the environment and the planet itself as well. Of course, it's a compatible view. Of course, we need to work together. The right to education, to life, to freedom of speech. They're valuable. They're not alone. They need to be part of a healthy environment when it comes to social and economic factors, and it needs to take nature as a dimension. We're part of nature after all. That's what we're talking about here. How can we match these two different visions through human right to sustainability? Now for this, I will take some moments to introduce our speakers. I wouldn't want to show you their resumes. Would take a lot of time, but let me sum it up. I'd like to begin with Dr. Jesus Cordano Fraga. He's a dear, beloved professor.
Catedrático de Derecho Administrativo de la Universidad de Sevilla.
He's part of the academic team at the Sevilla University. He's also part of the Environment and Law magazine. He's the author of multiple books. The list is long. I'd like to highlight some of them. One that is particularly important, protection to the adequate environment. I think it's one of his most well-known books, one that we'll get to know a bit more during this talk. He's participated in several collective books. He's the author of more than 100 studies published in specialized magazines. He's author of chapters in books. He's the main provider of several works, such as text, specialized text. And he's an expert in environmental law. Thank you so much, Juan Manuel. The first thing I shall say is thank you. I'm sitting here and I don't feel like I'm at home. I feel better than home. This great university, this great city is my home. I like to believe that my honeymoon trip, we divorced, spoiler alert, we got divorced. Things happen. But during my honeymoon, I came to what back then was known as DF, Mexico City. We were here for 7 days and then moved to Yucatan in the Sianca Reservation. Now, I want to evoke UAM professors who are not with us anymore. Professors I have the honor of meeting, Montañas and Ramón Ortega Vista. Of course, Jose Juan Gonzalez, who is the follow-up of that line. And I'll just say it. I think Jose Juan and Yvette are like jury marriage of law. They're a great team. And for me, this is a lifelong commitment. I feel like I'm part of UAM. So let's go. I brought this presentation. You might start projecting in. If you can, there's no problem at all. I just read a study that say that using PowerPoint actually dumbs the speaker down. And there's not a lot of margin, to be honest. And it also dumbs the public down. So what I learned is that it's dangerous to use a PowerPoint presentation. But then again, I want to talk about two different things. And I'll shut up as soon as this timer goes off. Remember to look for the dog sound. I just want to do this out of respect to the audience and the other speakers. Yes, of course. I'm a professor. I love teaching. So if I could, I will just keep on going and talking and talking. I'm like an addict, but with classes. Let's begin. Again, our topic is human right to sustainable development. Law runs through my veins. My father was a lawyer, so it's in my veins. I think it's always been the case. So this is not from an academic exclusive point of view. This is from a legal point of view as well. And I want to talk from the EU point of view. The Spanish Constitution was a pioneer in this matter. Maybe you don't know this little fun fact. Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain are known as the pigs in the EU. But we pigs are the pioneers in this matter. The Greek, Portuguese, and Spanish constitution were the first ones to talk about the environment. Now, I must say that it was done in a weak form. I don't know if you know this. In the world, there are 92 countries which consider the environment in their national constitutions. 177 happen at the legislation level. Now, I must admit it was done in a weak form. What happens in industrialized countries? An industrialized country is the boogeyman of environmental law. Germany has expressed that environmental protection does not grant rights, it is just a reflection of objective law. Now, can we project this on the screen, please? Then again, they're in my head. They're all in my head. So there's a pretty funny anecdote by Ortega y Gasset. He was given a conference and then all of his papers fell to the floor. Many people from the audience stood up to give him the papers back. And he said, "Don't worry, they're all in my head." So these people want to believe that environmental law is part of the constitutional law, but it's not true. It's just part of socio-economic policies. In our constitution, yes, we have reinforced protection laws, which are part of the fundamental laws or first-generation laws. This is just a guiding principle for all following policies, but it does not grant jurisdiction. It's all tied up. It depends on how the law interprets it. That's what the Constitution has said. In its declaration in January 1996. Let's move on. Here's Article 37 of the Fundamental Rights Letter of the European Union. This has the same value of the constitutive treatise of the European Union. Now, the question may be, when will the Latin American Union come into fruition? This is the way. I know that there's still a way to go for a world law, or state, as Kant said it. At the end of the day, we just need to drink some beer, to have a beer, and we'll realize that we're all brothers. We have the same culture. So we need to be representatives of a cultural, economical, and political space. If you realize this lie recognition, something that previous treaties, the Rome Treaty, the Amsterdam, Africa treaties, every 3 years there's a new treaty. So within the European Union policies, and according to the Sustainable Development Principles, an elevated level of protection towards the environment will be implemented. Of course, we can talk a lot about this, but it's not a fundamental right. The farthest he has reached is a very interesting position for me. Dieter Janicek in 23707 says that yes, we do have the right to claim for an action plan. So I think it's pretty important. It is a right to claim for authorities to do something about this serious problem. I don't know if anyone here is under 15 years old. All of you seem to know how life is like. So the truth just runs like water in a sewer. What happened here? Something very interesting.
I'm really sad that we don't have enough time because we would have a lot of fun. That's what I like about jurisprudence. But the environmental protection, to reflect protection of the environment. In the UK, remember the Powerly rating matters. These are not in the presentation, but I think that it is related to what we're talking about. So it is said that an aggression towards environment, an attack towards environment can hurt life, individual and family privacy, and the status quo of the home. So the sentence have a name in Spanish, and what should be a shame for all of us men is that the complaints come from women. Men are mermaids, and women says, "Here I am." They state it loud and clear. Right? Miss Pilar Lopez Ostra complains against Spain for bad orders, and the Human Rights Court says the status quo of the home has been violated and the family and individual privacy has been breached. So the rulings of this court are binding, and the state should be responsible for that. So this has given place for a long jurisprudence that would be really interesting to deep dive into it, but I mean, we're talking about the air power. We're talking about the windmills of 120 meters tall, and that create a bunch of noise. But I'm going to focus on what we are most talked, which, I mean, these are positive. Pilar Moreno Martinez versus Spain. Martinez versus Spain. It's for going over 28 decibels with the sound of the windmills. Every 3 decibels, double the intensity of the sound, and they were going over 28 decibels. That's a brutality. Your Cuenca versus Cardoso ruled in January 2023. In environmental law, this is really important, that when the fundamental rights are hurt, can be breached because of doing nothing. It is because of the lack of action, such as Lopez Ostra versus Spain, Martinez versus Spain, Cuenca Cardoso versus Spain, is because of the omission of the authorities. But here comes a revolution, because in the ruling, Pavlov versus Russia, as the conditioner reflects of Pavlov, do you know about that? That they would ring a bell to the dog, and at the end of the day, they would ring the bell after fisting the dog. The dog would just go outdoors. But well, going back, Pavlov, it's breaking the back of my friend, Mr. Putin. We send our best. I hope that they throw the missiles anywhere else but Ukraine. But in Pavlov versus Russia, it's a case of contamination, acoustic industrial contamination. And it is ruled against Russia because of the omission of the authorities to avoid the high levels of contamination. Well, just go ahead. All of these that here you have all the do's and don'ts. Yeah, the deep dive into it. This is Pavlov versus Russia. But here, leave it there. Stop it there. This is the last call. The climate litigation. In this case, the name is one of the parties. This is a woman. Klima Serionen. It's a woman from Austria that claims for the lack of action by the states towards climate change. This is an important ruling. I don't know if you can see the sequence. There's noise, then industrial contamination, and this from 9 of April 2024, climate change is being addressed. We have one of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights that the inhabitants of La Uroya, which is the same jurisprudence. We're doing fine with time. I have still 5 minutes to talk about sustainable development. The protection of the environment is of the utmost importance when we talk about sustainable development. We have a ruling a sentence to protect the environment. There were so many affirmations that were so violent. There was a ruling that stated, hey, let's protect the environment, but we need to protect the life of people. I don't know if you know that in Spain, one of the Modelo. First thing is life. Life comes first, and then from there, life with dignity and development, and then we talk about environment. So in a ruling of 28th of February 1991, it was ruled that the current law amended Article 1C4 of this directive. Move on with the with the second place in the Article 6.4, it is modified and it states that by the reasons, including socioeconomical reasons, you can tackle environmental protection. So there is an interesting jurisprudence that I invite you to check it out. I mean, you can go and check this presentation. We have several documents quoted that recovers all the European experience, and you can notice that things are not as there's more than meets the eye. Because in Europe, it has been said there's a factory for buses, but of the few things that are manufactured in Europe are planes, such as Airbus. Can we provide priority for it? Yes, it is a strategic for the development. It provides work jobs. A port in Tenerife, in Canarias, it is a paradise. Should you have the chance, go visit. People are amazing. They're lovely. Wines, weather, everything is just fine. Perfect spot to visit. But they eat for anything that comes through the sea, so they need a port. They built a port, and the only place they could build a port. And the jurisprudence in the sustainable development and environment protection highlights something fundamental I'm really sad that we don't have enough time to explain this, but the study of the alternatives. Let me tell you, this is something that I was taught by one of the big professors of environmental law, Oliver Taw. He was a professor, he was general attorney on the International Wildlife Federation in Washington. He was taken by Tulane, and he teaches in the outdoors. He was Socrates, basically. He told me, this is the key. The key are the alternatives. I will build a dike in Cozumel. A dam over here, a dike over here. Why here? The important thing is to study the alternatives. There's an amazing case in Portugal that is a tourist that goes in the specific area where birds are protected. And what happens? The court says, why here? You should have walked that path 5 kilometers that way or 10 kilometers away from here. I tell you the truth. It's illegal if you go from Faro to Lisboa. The highway goes by the protected area, but there's a highway. No. It means to an end, I guess, right? There is a sentence that talks about the methodology for the analysis, for the assessment on the projects that can be done and those that shouldn't be done. There is a C437 that has been published on the internet. I have 26 seconds. I'd rather just say what I think, but I will respect the time, but I will just close with a poem by a poem that I saw in a park in Desierto de los Leones by Nezahualcóyotl that states, this is a big conclusion. This is the dog has barked. I should be shutting up, but this is Nezahualcóyotl works. I love the sensantly singing. I love the color of the jade and the perfume of the flowers. But I love my brother, the man, more than I love nature. very emotional for all of us, and with contents that help us moving forward, of being more active in the protection of the fundamental human rights, the protection of the nature rights as well, and that we can match them. So this that you say, this the human right to sustainability turns into an integrated human right, and this is what Mr. Jesus Jordano just talked to us about. Thank you very much. We have the next presentation. It's by our speaker, Gabriel Real Ferrer. He's on Zoom. I don't know if we're ready. Can you hear us? Well, if you can hear us, let us know.
Bueno, pues voy a empezar con su currículum porque ella
I will start with his curriculum.
entonces damos tiempo para que los que están aquí vayan.
So we should have time.
Doctor Gabriel Real Ferrer, bueno, pues ustedes lo conocen, algunos otros, pues seguramente es su primera vez, pero no tengan duda de que es un gran catedrático, es un referente internacional de estos temas de sostenibilidad y de protección al medio ambiente. El doctor Gabriel Real Ferrer, pues es doctor por la Universidad de Alicante, España. Es profesor titulado también de la Universidad de Alicante. Sí.
Hola.
Buenas tardes. ¿Se escucha algo, doctor?
En Colombia.
Bueno, hola.
Medalla de
Hola.
Internacional Deportiva en Francia, en París, 2005. Y bueno, pues también ha sido miembro y profesor pues,
Well, Dr. Gabriel knows very much our country, our region. He's with us today. The floor is yours, doctor.
Bien, buenas tardes. Tenemos un problema de comunicación. Yo no recibo ningún audio. Parece
There's
que
a tech problem. I cannot hear you, but it seems that it is the moment that I should be talking, right?
Bien. Lo primero que quiero hacer es felicitar a la Maestría en Derecho de la Universidad
I
Autónoma
would like to congratulate the WAM
Azcapotzalco
Law
por haber organizado
faculty for having organized this summit that I consider to be necessary, and I want to thank you for the invitation to have us here. Even though I am not in person with you, I really like and I really enjoy that you have me as a guest. Let me tell you that I'm really glad to share with some of my friends that I have seen around, Professor
como el propio coordinador de la mesa,
with Professor
que hizo su trabajo, una tesis doctoral precisamente sobre los macroproyectos energéticos y su impacto en
Professor Manuel Zamora Velázquez,
a Victoria Gaviño, que sé que me está siguiendo.
I also want to say hello to Victoria. I feel in my place. I feel in my place in this talk.
El coloquio es extremadamente oportuno.
Well, I mentioned that this summit is really important and it is really relevant at this stage. The relationship between sustainability and human rights is a relationship between two subjects that are connected. We cannot aspire towards sustainability without talking about human rights, and there shouldn't be, and there wouldn't be human rights to defend if there is an environment around them. So they go hand to hand. The title for this roundtable, the human right to sustainability, more than a title, is a question, I think. Sustainability, should it be constituted as a human right? I think that the answer as an economical human right, no, but as a collective right, it should. We all have the right to hope, and hope comes through sustainability. For each of us, more than a right, it is an obligation. We have the obligation to be consequential with thriving the goals that we have set. I think that by a couple of minutes we should talk about the sustainability concept. It is a term that now has become a legend, that is on fashion. Everything is sustainable nowadays, but I don't think that the definition is quite clear. So let's remember it. Sustainability is the aspiration that pretends to get a global society that has no expiration date. And we, with our behavior, are setting an expiration date. And this sustainability that should be global should guarantee proper life to human beings. Humanity should remain in dignified conditions for everyone. The sustainability, we are talking about the environmental, the social, and the economic. These are three pillars for sustainability, but we have two problems. We have two problems. How are we related with the species? How are we related to the surroundings that the capabilities are not committed to satisfy our own human needs? What are the limits as a species? This is an asymmetric relationship from the species towards the environment. But the human is nature. The second problem, and this one is way more complicated, because if at first it's complicated, but we already know what the problem is, we know the solution. We know the problem and we know the solution. But for the second, it's way more complex. It's how do we relate it to ourselves? How is it related to the society? Where we can be a more fair and inclusive society. Sustainability, this vision of sustainability provides a holistic vision and a global vision.
Cualquier país,
Sustainability should be inclusive.
que se considere, va a depender de lo que hagan
So,
el resto de países.
what you consider wouldn't depend on what the rest of the countries will do. This is a battle where should we all win or should we all lose? Should we achieve sustainability for humanity or our future would be compromised? Regarding the relation human rights environment,
ver los informes de la relatora de Naciones Unidas
check on the reports on the UN.
Medio Ambiente, Astrid Puentes, que es una experta colombiana, pero que
where we have an expert, a Colombian expert,
informes pues son totalmente
that were the reports
con el medio ambiente.
are related
Si hablamos de las
towards the environment.
y económica,
If we talk about economic dimension,
esta sociedad que queremos construir a través de la
the society that we want to build around sustainability
más justa, más inclusiva, más igualitaria,
should take us to a more
una sociedad en la que
fair society, a society where we should guarantee the right to the home, the non-discrimination, the political participation, security, not only physical, but also towards complicated situations. That is to say, we have a set of human rights that we acknowledge, and we need to be sustainable. The human right to have a proper food, it's not. The lack of water is not sustainable. And we have a right for drinking water. So one thing leads to the next. These are linked. Fundamental rights are linked one to another. The international law starts with the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Humanity, Charter 148.
Y se materializa años después en los pactos internacionales sobre derechos civiles y políticos.
Years later, we have amendments.
De 1960.
There was the
Bien. Y después hay decenas de tratados
fundamental rights. So
que van a intentar implementar, asegurar.
So as we have noticed, we have tried to implement and to assure the guarantee this fundamental right.
Por los objetivos de desarrollo del milenio del año 2000 y los objetivos.
And we have the goals of the Millennium Development of 2000, and then we have the update to achieve them by 2015. And there we have a set of guidelines to walk the path towards sustainability. Nevertheless,
tenemos la sensación, al menos yo tengo esa sensación.
At least I can say for myself that we are not on the right path. There are some countries that have quit the Agenda 2030 because there is a lack of commitment towards the Convention of 2015 towards the sustainable development goals. So why are we not doing things in the right way?
Una sociedad que pueda continuar en el tiempo. A mi juicio, hay cuatro factores que explican.
I think that there are 4 factors that explain.
Aparente o relativo, espero que me equivoque, fracaso.
I hope I'm wrong when I say this failure.
El primero de los factores.
But the first factor that we always talk about it in our meetings, in our visions, in our missions, and in how we solve the problems, just come from an Occidental perspective, Western perspective. Sustainability should be global, so we need to have more than one vision.
La población del planeta para este año está prevista que lleguemos a los 8.060 millones de habitantes. Bien, pues de esos 8.060 millones de habitantes, 6.300 millones viven en
We have 800,000 million people around the world. Out from that 600,000 million live in Asia. So the Western perspective only holds 21% of the world population, and we're just providing this vision towards sustainability. So the Western civilization has less population, and so we are trying to impose our vision to the rest of the world. That's from the demographics. And now we go to the beliefs.
60 millones de habitantes,
of these 8,060 million, 5,000 million are non-Christian.
Son completas las religiones cristianas, católicos, protestantes, evangelistas, todos.
And out from there, 1,400 million belong to other branches of Christianity. In Islam, we have 1,400 billion. So we need to understand.
Tenemos que aprender a entender al resto
to understand the rest of the people in the world. There are several sets of values. And we are not going to change this in a blink of an eye. We need to understand that human rights are asymmetric. Will we solve that puzzle? I don't know. But we should try. But the Western vision that is imposed to the rest of the world should change.
This is
the first factor that we need to tackle on the way towards sustainability. Second obstacle is the Western concept, which is this concept of happiness. Because happiness is really related to doing business. It's completely related to money instead of to environment. So consumption are things that we need to manufacture, that we need to use raw materials to produce them.
Entre los jóvenes, que en base a su felicidad no tan solo en cosas, que también fenómenos, como nosotros, sino en likes. Ahora la pasión de los jóvenes es tener falsos amigos, seguidores.
So the passion of the young people are to have followers, fake friends. I mean, these are not the right messages. Not the right signals to send. And so this is a market economy where everything is managed through the social media, and it provides a social status. So this takes us to the third of the factors that we should analyze. if we want to face a reality that we live on.
Como ya decía hace 3 años,
As I said 3 years, as it has,
de la democracia a la hipocracia.
we went from democracy to hypocrisy.
Estamos pasando de la política
And now we're going from
al control de las
policies.
redes sociales. Quien controla las redes sociales es el relevante en la sociedad.
To the use of the social media, which is relevant to our society.
Control de la política por la economía.
We're controlling the policy with economy.
Quiero decir, la hipocracia, el control a través de las redes sociales,
Hypocrisy, the control through social media
de la orientación
of the young people.
de las masas,
How we deal with the masses.
se nos critica y ahora va
We're criticized.
amigo de longa data que se declaraba antropocentrista.
Because we have a vision that is
frente a los biocentristas, pero yo creo que estamos siendo sustituidos por los egocentristas.
human,
Al menos los
Center.
antropocentristas tenemos
but we are
una
just
perspectiva de las cosas.
being egocentric.
Debemos es defender al hombre, a la especie,
We need to understand
al amigo.
the humankind,
El poema
the
que
species.
nos ha ofrecido Jesús. Ahora no. Ahora lo que importa es lo que a mí me interesa.
No, what matters is what I care about.
Solo creo en aquello que yo creo.
And I only think of the things that I believe.
Solo creo en lo que yo creo. Y lo
And
que yo
if you
creo
only believe what I believe, and what I see is what I believe, and what I believe and I see is what I want you to believe,
nos lleva
then we're a little bit
al
lost,
cuarto
right?
factor
And it leads to the
relativamente
fourth
reciente
factor
que se está convirtiendo en un problema
that is becoming a problem
y un problema para la sostenibilidad.
and a problem for sustainability.
La negación de la autoridad científica. Me
Is
refiero al
to
negacionismo.
deny the scientific authority.
El negacionismo, ya no hablo de los terraplanistas, que estos son una
The blindness towards
hablo
scientific facts
la realidad científica.
and has growth.
En función de su
The flat earthers, for example,
no hay nada que les pueda convencer porque no es posible.
there's nothing that can convince the people that believe that Earth is flat because they deny
Seguramente lo conoce Jesús,
scientific
un
facts.
científico español del Consejo Superior de Investigaciones Científicas,
There's a
Fernando
Spanish scientist, Jesus probably knows him,
estaba dando entonces a sus alumnos
who was teaching his students
los negacionistas.
how to face
Lo
denialists.
primero es tener mucha. Hay que
The
tener
first thing,
mucha,
lots of patience.
es muy difícil convencerlos.
It's hard to convince them.
Grupos que me parecen aceptables. Los negacionistas, y no
Deniers
es un peligro menor, es un peligro
who
mayor.
don't believe this is a major problem
Y de lo que hay que
say,
hacer para corregir el cambio climático o minimizarlo. ¿Cómo le puedes hablar de eso a alguien que niega?
the question is how to explain the little actions we can take to save the environment to people who don't believe in it in the first place.
Lo traigo aquí. Es una cuestión importante, muy importante.
That's the
porque
very first problem, and it's a fundamental issue.
el primer grupo son los que son negacionistas por ignorancia.
Right? The first group is just people who deny due to their ignorance.
Los más benévolos, diríamos.
Those are
La segunda
the
categoría
harmless ones.
son los que son negacionistas por
Second category are people who deny it based on interests.
Son los que son
Third
negocios.
category are deniers based
La primera de las
on their
categorías de la
own
ignorancia
likeness.
es una cuestión de tiempo. Si realmente son de
Well, the first category is just a matter of time. If they really don't know about it, we just need to explain it.
Lo que dicen es que no la conocen.
They just don't understand. They don't know these topics.
El problema son las otras dos categorías.
The problem comes with the other two categories.
Todavía es manejable también.
I think the second is
Porque no les conviene.
manageable at best. It's not in their interest to accept this type of changes. They deny it because it's within their interests. We need to convince them that their interests are harmful for humanity in the long term. They need to recognize, to understand the risk and the science behind all of this. It is not easy. These are short-sighted people, but it's possible to change them. But the worst of these three categories is the third one, the salutary deniers. We can talk about political or religious zealots. But if we want to talk about sustainability, we need to fight back these groups that are rooted in political or socio-economical reasons. We need to do this if we want any chance of improving the planet's conditions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Gabriel. And thank you for reminding us that human rights also bring human responsibilities. Yes, we need to claim, but we need to contribute as well. So these were the presentations available at the table. Right now, there's a third section. This third presentation has a lot of experience behind it. It is Professor Victor Golares Romero, who will give out some comments on the topics touched on this table. Thank you very much. I like to say it's not just about the topics touched on this table, but rather than the whole colloquium. Environmental right has a lot of content available. Sustainability has a lot of content available. We need to question our own constitutional perception of what is correct. The current generations need to use the planet without compromising the future of next generations. It's something that has sparked an interest in me. From a legal point of view, I can just rephrase something I read from Dr. Monreal, saying,
y recordar en este sentido a dos obras que seguramente hay muchísimas más.
It says the right follows the facts, and I like to remember. I like to remind some cases. I like to talk about all of them, but the time is. I think even if we fed a computer with all existing books, we wouldn't have all the information necessary. But I remember two books. One by Toynbee, which is Cities in March. And it talks how concrete is covering the Earth's surface, which is an environmental issue. I think the answer is no other. The answer can be other thing than positive. Another one by Localvino, talking about invisible cities. Invisible cities, if I recall correctly.
Porque a veces no recuerdo bien las cosas, sino porque a veces tengo una memoria inventiva.
And I hope I can recall correctly. My memory is not the same as it used to be. Sometimes I tend to invent things. I hope it's not the case. But I remember the main character of the novel goes all the way from Italy to the Iberian Peninsula through the woods. Now the question is, would it be possible to do it nowadays?
la naturaleza.
Is this a representation of nature's degradation?
Con respecto a la legislación, pues hay
Comes to legislation, I mean, there are multiple laws that refer to environmental law, but I think environmental law can be a base for civil law. Why? Because civil law from the very beginning has given us enough rules to claim back the damage received by a person due to another person's action. You understand all of these concepts. You understand the liability concepts. Now, this takes me back to one of the first conversations we had about these topics, talking about the objective law. There are certain authors saying that laws and rights are only attainable to humans. From a subjective point of view, it's correct. I mean, we are the one creating our own rights. From an objective point of view, it's not correct because we can create rules that imply sanctions towards damage done to nature, to animals, and this does not require animals or nature itself to claim said rights.
La que es necesaria, me parece, a los derechos sobre el medio ambiente. Y luego, pues nada más presentar para finalizar, porque
Then again, just to sum it up, you know,
no conozco el derecho ambiental.
I am not familiar with environmental law.
Antes,
Certain things that have been mentioned and I believe to be important are that, yes, I think countries that use weapons in one way or the other must be responsible, must be accountable towards humanity, not just because of the damage they pose towards humans, but the damage they pose towards nature and environment. We know the effects of natural disasters, rainforest destruction, global warming. The question is, do we all have a voice on the destruction of the Amazon rainforest? What will Brazil say about it? Does Brazil have a right to voice on the rest of the issues in the world? I mean, they can say things, but doing things, that's harder. So just to sum it up, I'd like to mention certain issues that I've read about. It may seem important to talk about issues such as transition and take it towards emitting CO2 gases as well as carbon neutrality. It may seem important to reach the goals of the Paris Accords. It's important to promote the conservation of sea life as a right of humanity, not just one country, to create binding tools. I mean, you can have international treaties, but many of the times these treaties are just ignored. We can talk about upcoming American administration that does not care about these issues. Why? Because they can still profit off this industrial policies. To fight back plastic contamination, plastic pollution. It's something that it's present on our day-to-day, maybe on every person on the planet, to stop illegal fishing. There are no elvers left.
que también están implicados los poderes económicos, sí.
Yes, there are economic powers implied.
Todos estos problemas ambientales, fundamentalmente, pues podemos hablar
Now,
aspecto colectivo.
we could talk about a collective side to the environmental law, right? Not only from an individual standpoint. The main environmental issues are collective issues. The main accountable people are public powers, states, and large corporations. How can we reach this goal? By evolving the law, by recognizing and by making sure collective actions are complied.
And
what I was thinking before I took the floor is that environmental law, at least for me,
intervenir en este coloquio como una madeja con múltiples puntas. Cualquiera de las puntas que yo tome, las puedo desarrollar.
it's probably a skin with several edges. Sometimes I will take a small thread, sometimes I will take all of it, and it would be more interesting. I can't remember if it was Cicero who said, we don't need to multiply laws. To do so, implies a non-compliance of it. It means that the administration is not effective. The less rules, the better the government is, as long as they are compliant.
No es desde un principio, sino que al principio se habló del derecho ambiental, no del derecho al medio ambiente.
We have to take this into consideration because back then it was a right to the environment, not environmental law. With the pass of time, we have reached a point where we talk about the rights of the environment, not to the environment. So I want to thank the organizers. I want to thank all of the presenters.
Esta referencia que tuvieron conmigo y me gustó mucho encontrar
I was glad.
Todos los ponentes, sino a Santiago Oñate, que es
I was glad to see Santiago Oñate, who is a pioneer in environmental law in Mexico. I can't remember if he was the first person in office in charge of the environment in DF. I remember many of his students and colleagues are present in this room. And I'm sure they will be. I just couldn't miss the opportunity to listen. To listen to this so-called energy and intellectualism monster. So make sure to take a look at his resume. Make sure to take a look at each presenter's resume. And you will see that you have just enjoyed from a luxury banquet prepared and cooked by the best chefs. And maybe modest, but here we are. Thank you so much to our commentator, Victor Golares, who closed this with in a very impressive way. I give the floor back to Jesus because I think it's impressive because it reflects what has been done and what's about and what has to be done. We're about to close this table, so as a conclusion, I would just like to
pues un
mention
espacio donde se respetan los
that we need to create space where that a space where human rights are respected is the space where nature and the environment are also respected. It's the other way around. A place where nature is respected is a place where we can protect human rights. It is a link that's always present, and it is on us to make sure we can boost it towards the future. Thank you so much for being here. Now we'll grant some diplomas. I don't know if Dr. Gabriel Real is still online. I think he couldn't listen to us, but Doctor, thank you very much for your presentation. We want to thank you for that presentation. Now we'll hand out these diplomas.
Y bueno, también adelanto un poquito ahorita que hablaban de menús y de banquetes.
While speaking about menus and food, in a while we'll have our lunch break.
Antes de ello, los organizadores les van a dar unos mensajes.
But before that, we will receive some messages from our organizers. Thank you so much for participating.